For all children loved and cared for in the family of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, their future holds hope and bright promise. Had they not traveled along the wayside of one man's calling, their life's journey would be one of almost certain despair. Like the journey of 1,000 miles that begins with a single step, the miraculous story of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos began a half-century ago with one child in a tiny parish in an old marketplace in Cuernavaca, Mexico. William Bryce Wasson, born December 1923 in Phoenix, Arizona, the eldest son of Mary and William Wasson Sr., was nurtured with values which prepared him for that moment of destiny, for a journey of love that would embrace hundreds of people and touch the lives of thousands of children. A deep sense of social responsibility led him to the seminary, where he completed his studies, but due to a thyroid condition, he left prior to being ordained and traveled to Mexico.
When I first came to Mexico, I was not a priest. I'd finished my studies for the priesthood, but I was not an ordained priest. But I started teaching criminology at the University of the Americas, and then being counselor at the American School Foundation. And then about a year or so, the Bishop of Cuernavaca offered to ordain me a priest.
As though by divine intention, at the age of 30, his hopes and dreams were on the threshold of possibility.
And because I had finished my studies, he said that it provided my health held out good, he would ordain me a priest. And he did. And that was in 1953. Then in 1954, having this idea constantly in my mind of helping children, was the idea of helping children who were destitute and homeless, orphaned, and abandoned. And so that was in my mind constantly, and the opportunity provided myself with taking this first boy out of prison.
That 15-year-old boy, beaten by his stepfather and unwanted by his mother, was typical of the many children discarded to the streets, forced to fend for themselves and survive by any means possible. The church poor box had been too tempting for the hungry boy, who was caught stealing and faced a harsh prison sentence for his crime. Father Wasson convinced the police that the boy's only crime was that of being hungry and agreed to take custody. Days later, 8 other boys were brought from prison to Father Wasson, and by the end of 1954, he was caring for 32 children in an old brewery warehouse on Alavro Obregon. That providential encounter with a young church thief was the compassionate and humble beginning of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos.
My name is Guillermo Mejia. This is my brother, Cirilo Mejia. We used to be before the Pequeños. We used to be with my mother, when she was working hard for us. But we were sometimes in trouble with money, and we want to have many things, but we were poor. But my mother came sick, so she went to the hospital, and with a person with contact to us brought both to the Pequeños, and we started to be Pequeños when the father used to be the first house in Álvaro Obregón. And
soon after the brothers' arrival in 1955, a deadly hurricane devastated Tampico, leaving hundreds of homeless children in its wake.
And we went there and we gathered up 39 children and almost doubled our population. And so whenever a crisis would come within our country in Mexico and later in other countries, we would round up the children that were destitute and take them in and give them a home.
Mi nombre es Araceli Arano Valerio. Yo ingresé a los Pequeños Hermanos a los 5 años.
Araceli's mother, who was dying, desperately pleaded with Father Wasson to take her family, 5-year-old Araceli, her younger sister Lulu, and brothers Nicholas and Jorge. Because families were never split, and because there were only accommodations for boys and no one to care for the girls, there was a reluctance to take the family in. It was through the insistence and determination of Miss Luz Blanco, Father Wasson's volunteer secretary, and the kindness of Walter and Virginia Nolan, who generously made their home available, that the sisters and other girls were able to be cared for. The true Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos family had its beginning. Within 2 weeks, 30 girls joined the family.
The family unit is a very important thing with us. We have our large family, and then we have our little small blood families within the larger family. And everyone knows each other. Everyone shares the same food and clothing. And so little by little we got started that way.
They take care of each other. They look for each other. There's no such thing as family barriers or social status. They are a big, large family, and they support each other. They accept each other, whatever the condition.
Siblings would always be a family within the larger family, never separated, never up for adoption, never shuffled off to foster families. Teaching children to love themselves and each other, to take responsibility for one another as brothers and sisters, and to share whatever they had is at the heart and soul of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. For this loving enterprise of the heart, there was always one more child, one more family, one more opportunity to salvage a precious life.
Well, it was the year of 1964. My mother had just died on January 10th, and the ones that we were 4. Younger brother, Alfonso, and younger sister, Lourdes, and the youngest, which was Ruth. She was 3 years old when she came to NPH.
By the early 1960s, the family had grown to 300 boys and 96 girls. It had always been Father Wasson's wish to have all the children living in one facility. The gift of 4 centuries-old Hacienda San Antonio de Acolman, on 200 acres of land, became a significant stop along Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos' journey of love. Alfredo Provencio, a longtime volunteer and counselor, was put in charge of Acolman.
Wherever you find the pequeños, especially in those days, whenever you found pequeños with Alfredo, they were just simply ebullient. They were just a bunch of kids having a great time. And Al knew how to discipline, and he knew how to maintain his authority, but they all knew that he was for them. That's all there was to it.
Al met Joan Slight, a volunteer who was working in Cuernavaca, as Father Wasson's secretary. They were later married, and together, as directors, oversaw the transformation and development of Acolman's crumbling ruins into a thriving family community.
And we lived in a